Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest InteractionKit video. This video is designed to pick up where we left off, so if you guys haven't seen the earlier tutorial videos, I'd recommend you going back and taking a look at that first. But what I was thinking of doing in this video is to show you guys how to build up some interesting interactions. So in this scene, I have added a few additional interactions with these magic blue balls, because why not? And you can interact with them and they kind of vanish into a blue puff of smoke. The idea of these is basically to simulate picking up loot or picking up objects or finding treasure or something along those lines. So it just goes to show that you can do all kinds of interactions with InteractionKit, and this one is actually quite easy to build. So I'm gonna show you guys how to do it from scratch, more or less, and let's just get right into it. So I'm gonna start off with the prefab of the sphere that I already have. So I'll just drop that into the scene, and just to give you guys a quick look at what we have here, it is essentially a sphere, a blue kind of glowy particle, which is this bit here, and on top we have this icon game object. I briefly touched on this on the first video, but I didn't really show you guys how it works, and I will do in this video. So the idea is this object here will always be visible to the player, but if we're close enough to see an interaction, this little eye icon will kind of vanish to show the interaction UI, and if we move away, this is gonna go away again. But you'll see how this works as we build this up. So right now it's just a prefab, it doesn't do anything. Let's do a quick test just to show you guys what I mean. So if I just run into it, nothing happens. So yeah, it's not really doing anything at the moment. So let's make it interactive. So we go to game object, InteractionKit, make game object interactive, and there we go. So we have our interaction over here. And one thing I will quickly mention is you might notice that there is a parent to the interaction itself. And the idea of this is you can actually change the offset of where the interaction is in regard to the object itself. So this will help you if you have any kind of collision problems, or if you want to place it in a very specific place. You should do it from the parent and not this object. So this should always sort of be 0, 0, 0 in terms of local position. So all of your offsets should be moved with this. Okay, and so let's set up this interaction. So we're going to call this, just to follow the naming convention of the magic blue ball, because why not? And we're going to use as a type, we're going to say take. We're going to use the word take because we're simulating the idea of picking up loot. So that's cool. And now we have hide game icon. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drag this object here, the eye, and I'm going to drag this into the hide game icon. So as I mentioned earlier, if the InteractionKit UI shows up, this eye is going to disappear if we're looking at this object. It's a kind of cool effect, and you'll see this in action very soon. So we don't really need to change the hand, but we'll just do it anyway to be consistent, just in case we want to change the default icon later on. And it's time to set up an event. We only need one event for this. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to just give it a name. We're going to call it take the magic blue ball. And yeah, we don't need any conditions for this because it's always going to run the same way. And we're going to build up some actions. So the first action we want to do is we want to create a game object. And just to show you what I mean, I have another particle effect here, and if I was to bring it into this one just to make it in the same place, so if I simulate that, it's kind of a big sort of like a explosion of blue cloud kind of thing, and that's what we're going to use to tell the player that, you know what, we've picked it up. Also on that prefab, I have a small script. Here it is, as well as an audio source. So the script is basically it finds the particle system at the start of when the object is instantiated. It will figure out how long this particle effect will last for, and then it destroys it after that amount of time. So it's a pretty simple, quick little script. So basically, as soon as this prefab enters the game area, it will show its particle effect and then destroy itself straight after. I don't have any sort of pooling systems and stuff set up here, just to keep things simple. That would be kind of trivial to add. But anyway, so that's how the prefab thing's going to work. So what we're going to do is we're going to, once we interact with this sphere, we're going to create a game object. And the game object we're going to create is the picked up effect. So that's the particle effect. And then it's asking us, we can tell it to actually create it at a specific position. And the position we want to use is the sphere itself. So basically we're saying, bring that blue cloudy prefab into the game and place it exactly in the same position as the cube, as the sphere right here. So that's the first thing that's going to happen. And the second thing that's going to happen is we're going to destroy the sphere right after. So we add the destroy game object action, and again we drag in the sphere prefab there. And now that is a complete event. So just to quickly recap, what we're doing is, once we see the sphere and we're within activation distance and we trigger it, this event is going to fire off. There's no conditions to check, so it's always going to fire this one. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to create a game object, and the game object it's creating is that special effect blue cloud thing. And after it's done that, it's going to destroy the entire sphere game object and everything inside. So let's give it a try and see if it works. So I'm going to press play. And we're going to go over here. Okay, and the first thing you'll see is, you see how the eye disappears when the InteractionKit UI comes up? That's that hide game object field that we used. That's what that does. And now if we try to trigger it, there we go. The blue cloud of stuff comes into the game area, the sphere vanishes, and that's how it works. You could also, if you were if that was supposed to be some kind of gold or like a currency of some kind within the game, you could easily add a send message script, which would connect to your inventory somehow, and then you can literally connect it to anything and build up all kinds of cool events and actions that way. So I hope that kind of makes sense. And the next thing I quickly wanted to look at is to take a look at some conditional events, because so far we haven't really covered that. So let's jump over to our NPC over here, and if we open him up, here we go, we have 3 events. And let me close the actions first so we can just have an easier look at the 3 events. So basically what happens when you talk to this NPC, which we've called Ethan, is there's 3 possible events, and I think it's easier if I just show you guys. So I'm going to press play, and oops, and I'm going to go over to Ethan. Okay, so when we talk to Ethan, the first thing he says to us is, every time you talk to me, I'll say something different. If I talk to him again, he'll say, this is the second thing I've said to you. And if we talk to him a third time, This is the third time my dialogue will now be reset. And if I press E again, and you can tell we've looped every time you talk to me, I'll say something different. So we're back to the first event again. So the way we're doing this is with a player pref, and all of the conditions, the conditional logic within InteractionKit happens via player preferences in Unity. So what we've done is we've assigned the player pref integer to Ethan, and we can actually choose between player pref strings, floats, or integers to work with. So with this kind of stuff, I'd recommend working with integers because it just makes things simple and it's less room for, you know, human error. So we have this player pref which we've called IK, so InteractionKit underscore Ethan. So this player pref's integer is going to basically hold the status of the conversation essentially. So the first time we talk to Ethan, the first condition will check to see, do we actually have a player pref's integer called IK Ethan? So if it does not exist, then this first event is going to trigger. And if we have a look at the actions, you can see I have a send message action, which is talking to the messaging system I've got here. So I basically essentially send it a string to say every time you talk to me, I'll say something different. And that box will show up to show that. So that's that send message, that's what that does. And then the second action, which is what controls the flow, is a player prefs action. So what we've done here is after this event is triggered, we're going to set the integer IK Ethan to a value of 1. So if we quickly have another recap of this, and what we're doing here is the first event says that the player prefs integer IK Ethan does not exist. So at this point, when the player prefs takes on a value of 1, this event is no longer going to trigger because that's no longer true. Because at that point, the player pref's number IK Ethan does exist and it has a value of 1. So this is going to get skipped. So the next event, when we talk to him again, is now checking does the player pref's IK Ethan value, does it exist and does it value the number 1? And because in the last action we've set it to 1, we know that this is going to trigger at that point. And then the same thing kind of happens again. We send another message to the messaging system to say this is the second thing I've said to you, blah blah blah. And then we have another player prefs action, but this time we set the IK Ethan integer to a value of 2. So if we try to interact with him a third time, this is no longer going to be true either because the value doesn't equal 1. It will, and so this is not true anymore. So the value will then be a number of 2, and then the third event will be triggered instead because this is asking, does player prefs IK Ethan equal 2? And at that point it will equal 2, and then on the third time we'll have a message that says this is the third time, blah blah blah. And then finally we delete the key IK Ethan. So what essentially happens at this point is we've totally got rid of the key IK Ethan. So if we talk to him again, the first event is now true again because that key doesn't exist at that point. I hope this makes sense. It's a little tricky, but once you start working with this, this is going to be a really, really cool way of doing things. So if we go through it again, and while we talk to Ethan, I'll quickly kind of narrate to show what's going on. So off we go. Okay, here's Ethan. So we're going to talk to him for the first time. So at this point, player prefs IK Ethan does not exist. We do not have a player prefs called that. So we talk to him. So every time you say something to me, I'll say something different. So remember, at this point now, player prefs equals 1. So if we talk to him a second time, this event should now trigger. So this is the second thing I've said to you, because at that point when we triggered it, IK Ethan had a value of 1. So at the end of that action, it set IK Ethan to a value of 2. So when we talk to him the third time, this third event will trigger. So here we go. This is the third line. My dialogue will now be reset, and it's being reset because we're deleting the key IK Ethan, which will then bring us back full circle to the first event. And every time you talk to me, I'll say something different. So that's one way of having sort of conditional dialogues. There's loads of different things you could do. This method is kind of like just tracking a sequence. You could have things, for example, if you're looking for a door and you needed a key from somewhere, you could have it ask the player preferences, oh, do I have a key called, main door key or something like that? And if it does, it will let you in, and if it doesn't, it will tell you to go away or go find it or something along those lines. So this offers you a lot of power to really build stuff up in InteractionKit, and it makes it so that you don't actually have to kind of script everything by hand over and over and over again. You could design it in such a way where these interactive objects can actually become prefabs that you can reuse in almost any scene, and it will really streamline your workflow. So I hope this makes sense, and you guys can see the potential power here. Just to quickly note, at the beginning of every scene, I have a object somewhere. If I can find it. There we go, level setup. So essentially we delete these player preferences at start so that they don't interfere with any of the logic in the interact screens. So I hope all of this makes sense and you guys are starting to see what you can really do with this system and how flexible it is. And I hope you guys decide to use InteractionKit in your own projects, and thanks for watching. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to contact me on the forums or send me an email. I'm always happy to help. Cheers.